Well, hello, everybody, and thank you so much for tuning in to Act 3 on CHOY 101.7 FM. Today in the Zoom booth, I have an interesting and wonderful gift to bring to the community, and that is coming through a play that is Brother 12, a musical dark comedy. I'm sure I haven't got totally the title right, but my guest, Bill Miner, is going to share everything there is to do with the play. Let's get started with the program. Hi, Bill. How are you?
I'm very well. Thanks very much for inviting me to your lovely program.
Well, thank you. It's always great to be able to share cool things with our community. And so, and the show itself goes all the way from Duncan, kind of up to Campbell River area and then across to the Sunshine Coast. So for all of our listeners, that's all geographically easy for the most part to come across to watch a play at the Port Theatre. Why don't you tell us a little bit about this program, this musical, and break it all open as to the whys and the wheres and the hows and the goodies.
Sure, and just to clarify, we're actually performing at the VIU Malaspina Theatre.
My apologies. Sorry, I thought you said Port Theatre. My apologies.
That's where the tickets will be. Everyone can get tickets from the Port Theatre website. Yeah. So, Brother 12, for those who aren't aware, is a historical figure from the Nanaimo area, who in the late 1920s moved to the Cedar by the Sea area and created a cult following based on some of the teachings that purportedly he had channeled through this group called the Masters of Wisdom. And they, without belaboring it, they were intriguing enough at the time that people from all over North America and some from Europe came all the way to Nanaimo and sat at the feet of this guru who he called himself Brother 12. His name was actually Edward Wilson, and he had been a mariner who was born in England and ended up here, created a cult, bought some property, and had at one time hundreds of acolytes staying around, doing his bidding, giving him all of their earthly goods for an opportunity to learn of all of these teachings that were from the Aquarian Foundation.
Oh, so my goodness. So he sounds like an absolutely fabulous character to start with.
He was so intriguing that it was hard for people to glean whether he was actually believed his teachings or he was simply just a charlatan that was just bilking all these poor patsies out of their hard-earned money. But the musical itself sort of takes a piece of his life later on in his when his career in Nanaimo with his whip-toting mistress, Madam Z, and just how the last few months of his time here were spent. And that's what the musical is about. And it's about a fictitious trio of intrepid investigative journalists in Nanaimo, and they're determined to discover the secrets. And so it's their clash with Brother 12 and Madam Z. That's what the musical is all about.
Oh my gosh, it sounds so much fun. I love the concept about it, right? Just the curiosity of some of the guru type conversations that were going on, right? What are you the writer of the play or the director?
Yes, I'm a playwright. So I wrote the play and I wrote the lyrics to, there's about 13 original songs. And then I collaborated with a very well-known musician named Marty Steele for the music.
So obviously something must have led you to kind of look at this guy and go, dude, this is somebody I need to know about and I want to turn it into a musical. Was it the cult following part? Like, what was it that intrigued you about this gent?
Yeah, it's a good question. The play itself originated as I had written a series of live radio plays. So we actually, the Brother 12, I used Brother 12 as a foil for this Doris Abercrombie, who's this investigative journalist, this full of moxie, living, battling as a woman investigative journalist in a man's world in the late 20s. And I looked around for an antagonist for her, and Brother 12 just sort of intrigued me as being this character who has this Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde persona, where is he really this giving leader of this cult, very concerned with his following, his flock, or is he really just a charlatan, a con man, to, like in The Music Man, to con people out of their money? So that's how it started. And then the more I started discussing Brother 12, everybody that I bumped into in the Nanaimo area seemed to have a story, a connection. Oh yeah, Brother 12, did you know this about him? Or, my aunt was actually a follower. And, so it just took on a life of its own. And when I decided to make a musical, to move out of plays into the musical, it just seemed like a perfect combination of characters and stories to create that. And that's what happened.
Oh my goodness, what a wonderful way for things to come together. I'm always inspired by real life events that sort of, not only is there something that's real and historical about it, but there's also, this terrific kind of storyline to modernize it in today's world so that
Yes.
people can really grasp really what may have happened in the past that has partially become the history of our future as well. So
It is.
I'm not a native to Nanaimo. I came across about 13 years ago. So I've never heard of Brother 13, or Brother 12, I mean. So from the time that when you first started talking about this, you had mentioned that, people in the community had started to tell you these different stories. Like how long ago did he pass away, or how long did the cult part of it end? Do you have any idea of what that all kind of broke down to become?
Yeah, sort of. I think at the height, the Aquarian Foundation, run by Brother 12, and as I said, he ended up with a very intriguing, and she's probably easily as intriguing a character as Brother 12 himself is. Madame Z is what she ended up calling herself. I think the height of their cult and with the most hundreds of followers was in about 1929.
Wow.
And he disappeared. There was a huge court proceedings, and my musical, we have a film version of this very iconic mythical court proceedings where it purportedly he cast a spell on one of the key witnesses, who all of a sudden couldn't start speaking and started talking in tongues, and again the prosecutor and the judge were affected by it. So we have a film version of that. But early on, about in the early 1930, him and Madame Z mysteriously disappeared purported with a great deal of money and on their yacht, and sailed to Europe, and where I believe the history has it that he died in the mid 1930s, mysteriously in Switzerland in the mid 1930s. So that's what so his time in the Nanaimo area was filled with myth and stories and rumors. And it was tailor-made for a musical, just to be able to tell the story. So we have some very comedic scenes and these interesting characters, and then they break into tuneful songs, which people that love musical theater just love that.
Yeah, I'm a musical theater fan from way back, so I'm delighted to hear what some of these tunes are going to sound like for sure. And so you mentioned that you had written the 13 songs. That's where my 12 and 13 got mixed up when I looked down at my notes. Yes. So you wrote the 13 songs. How long have you been a singer-songwriter?
Yeah, so I'm as I said, I spent the majority of my early time as a playwright writing, plays, one-act plays, full-length plays, and just my love of musical theater and my love of writing lyrics struck me to venture out and write some lyrics for songs. I collaborated initially with Antoni Rodanti, who's a local, well-known, very gifted musician and composer. And when I went to relaunch it and make it a full-length musical, I had written 6 new songs, and somebody put me in touch with Marty Steele, and he knew nothing of Brother 12, never heard of him. And I put these lyrics in front of him, and we collaborated. It took us about 6 months, but he's just such a wonderful composer. We were able to, between us, I think, paint the picture of these different characters through these musical numbers. And he, really through a rich variety of musical genres. So we're not really pigeonholed in the 20s. We're not pigeonholed to just jazz. We've got a little bit of calypso. We've got a tango in there. And
fabulous.
The audience, there's a lot of toe tapping, earworms, and some great characters.
Well, I'm definitely excited to be able to hopefully attend the show, because it sounds like it's a whole lot of fun right from the get-go. So, but writing whether it's a musical or writing just about anything, takes an awful lot of time and a lot of dedication. Bill, have you always been interested in this work? Have you always been a theater person, or did you come from a different career and then sort of have it as like somewhere simmering and decide to bring it back out again later in life? Or what possessed you to go down this road?
Yeah, that's another great question. I had gone to theater school. Well, I've gone to academic university, but I had really loved theater as early as junior high school. And so I did finally get coaxed by people who thought, really, you should go to theater school. They kept egging me on. So I did audition, and I went to theater school in the early 80s and did lots of theater, continued to do theater. But I always thought that I wanted to try writing plays. I started with 1-act plays and then full-length plays. They were all produced you learn from just like anything in life, you feel you learn from every experience. So I thought, well, every play seems to be well received, get some feedback and move on. And I just wanted to try to write a musical. And as you say, it's a learning curve. It's you're really risking a lot by you're really putting your heart in your sleeve when you put something you've written out to the public. And it just went really well. And later on, I revisited it and wrote some more songs and had the collaboration with the composer, interested some wonderful musical theater people to be involved with it. And then Western Edge, Frank Moore, and who's a dear friend and a very gifted playwright himself, thought, and we'd been in each other's productions for 20 years. And when I said that I remounted it and I'd wanted to relaunch it, Frank was kind enough to offer to have Western Edge produce it.
Oh,
which
wonderful.
was last year, spring of last year. Frank was in it. We cast some really good people. And it actually, the spring 22 production, it seemed to be a perfect storm of just at the time when people were willing to come back to live theater. We'd had 2 years where we'd been doing things over Zoom, and it was had just the right people involved, and we were darn lucky to get live audiences, and we sold out every production. We even put on an extra production, and we live streamed it out. So it was a wonderful experience. And when we thought we wanted to do it again in a bigger venue, well, what are some of the things that you'd like to do if you're going to do it again? What's going to make it? What audience were you going to get the same audience back? Why would they come back? Well, to have a live jazz band, to have a chorus. Now we have a full chorus of dancers and singers that are going to raise the bar in the choreography.
Whoa.
So yes.
So how many iterations is this then? Is this the third iteration of Brother 12?
This is the third iteration. The first was launched with just with no music.
Yes.
And again, we did that twice. It was pretty well received. And then when I wrote the first 3 or 4 songs and put music in it, we did it for the Nanaimo Fringe Festival in 2012. So that's 11 years ago.
So this is
the fourth.
Yeah.
This is the 4th launch. This is with
Whoa.
a live band and a dedicated chorus of 5 wonderfully gifted young singers and dancers from the Nanaimo area.
Mm-hmm.
And this has a new lead, Brother 12, who is from Nanaimo, who had just come off of playing the lead in Rocky Horror Picture Show at the McPherson.
Oh, wow. Wow.
They played Frank M. Furter. And then now they're playing Brother 12.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. You know, it makes me kind of think about plays. You know, being a musical theater person myself, going back into my life as a kid, I, like you, sort of started it when I was in junior high and played with it for a while into my early adulthood. And then I kind of put it away for quite a long time. Theater in general, I put away for a long time. But some of the things that I'm always inspired by is how shows can come back and come back and come back. And each time they come back with a new twist, they create a different genre almost out of that twist.
Yes.
To create a brand new audience and a brand new way that people can see the same character. Recognizing that obviously your favorite production will be Brother 12, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Was there, or is there, a production that you have been inspired by over the years that maybe you've seen do several iterations of as well?
Well, it's funny you should say that, because I could hardly wait to see the new West Side Story.
Oh, yes.
It was a work of art. I mean, I was a huge fan of Sondheim anyway. Love his lyrics, love his storytelling, and it's an iconic piece of musical theater. West Side Story, just
absolutely.
It retells Romeo and Juliet. Obviously, it has all of those fateful components of that star-crossed lovers of Romeo and Juliet, yes, told in a different way. And when I knew that there was going to be a new version with all of these wonderful people, this wonderful choreographer, and of course, all of the money that they could throw at this new production, I could hardly wait. And when I saw it, there were parts of it that brought tears to my eyes. It was so wonderfully and beautifully realized.
Yes, yes,
It
yes. You mentioned Sondheim, and
Yeah.
Sondheim, if you're a musical theater buff in any way, then you know Sondheim and you know him well. Recently, actually, I was in Vancouver visiting friends where there was a Sondheim tribute that was done.
Yes.
With, I think there were probably, it was part of the Jewish Film Festival, I believe, but there were probably 5, or not the film festival, I beg your pardon, the Jewish theater festival that happens, yes, in Vancouver once a year. And so there were 6 actors that produced a number of Sondheim's songs, half of which I knew, half of which were way, I had no idea, right? Yes. Legends like that there isn't a word to describe them, I think, adequately.
No.
Besides Sondheim, do you have a favorite?
Well, I'm a big Gershwin fan, so I'm a big Porgy and Bess fan. I love the storytelling, of course, the music,
yes,
the characters. It has everything for me. I mean, I like classical opera musicals as well. I'm a huge fan of of Le Bohème and Carmen, and some of the
Yes.
ones that I think are more accessible. They're almost closer to popular, what would be popular accessible musicals of the time.
Yes.
You know, they're not
Yes.
as heady as the Ring Cycle or Wagner or you know, Rigoletto or things like that. But you know, Le Bohème, I mean, I believe Le Bohème is what Rent is based on.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
you know, that story of again of the Bohemians. I believe Rent must take it from Paris to New York, but it's still Bohemian artists struggling to make a living and do their art. And
Yes.
I haven't seen Rent, so I don't know if the lead female dies of consumption. But you know, again, it's the storytelling, like you were saying so intuitively last time, that the stories get they're sort of Greek tragedies, then Shakespeare takes them, then some of the 19th century composers take it, and then some of the 20th and 21st century composers take those stories, put them somewhere else, put them somewhere modern, and then change it around, change the lyrics, add different songs, and it draws a whole new audience who maybe don't even know of that connection.
Absolutely. Yes. And it brings I agree with you. I mean, when people look back at some of the older musicals, they don't necessarily resonate with them of the day because life was different in the day.
Yes.
But now, you know, when you're seeing a younger generation coming up into musical theater and you're able to at least touch them with some of those beautiful gems.
Yeah.
You know, I think that there's something so well-rounded. I used to always say, I was a teacher for many, many years. And what I've always said to my students is no matter what you do in life, you need to become an actor, even for 15 minutes.
Yes.
You need to get to the stage. You need to sort of be enveloped by the beauty of creativity that comes with theater that doesn't come in any other place, and especially for musical theater. So having said that, and sort of listening to some of the inspiration that you've had over your life, where do you think that the songs that you wrote ended up landing? Were they more Sondheim-ish? Did they lean in to more of a flavor, since you talked about having more than one different style of music on the stage?
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think my lyrics, lyrics are they're an amazing entity to craft, because you want them to be from a voice of a character. You want them to add to the story of the character, either their pathos or their origin or something, to add to the storytelling of the narrative. And so that's what you start with, but then you have to realize, okay, it has to have interior rhymes in the line. The syllables per line sort of have to match, and then you have to have something sort of catchy in the storytelling, and then it all has to kind of make sense, and it has to tell a story. So I'm very much of the Sondheim school. I like complicated lyrics.
Yes.
You know, in the storytelling, I think you can still be tuneful and have interesting lyrics, and you don't have to take them down to a simplified level, although there's nothing wrong with sometimes simplified perfection.
Of course, of course.
So when I first started collaborating with Marty Steele, who's a brilliant composer and knows so much about musical theater, all musical theater. He's been involved with professionals all over North America, and just probably the best jazz pianist on the island. So when I talked with him and he took the lyrics, the first note I got was, oh my God, there's so many lyrics, and Bill, can we do something? And I started telling about the stories and why they meant a lot. No, I'm not married completely to this lyric. And he started, well, I think I've got an inspiration for the character. And I would tell him, this is what I feel is happening in the scene. It's light, it's dark, and he would start sending me snippets of melodies on his piano, and he said, I have to get rid of this lyric. I just can't do it. Bill, I can't do it with this lyric. I forgive me, and I said, okay, get rid of it,
Yeah.
okay, so that's kind of the
Yeah.
process that happened. And as far as the color or tone or melody style, music style between us, I think there's probably 5 or 6 different musical styles within the song, and it's based on the storytelling from the character's perspective, I think.
Well, which also brings me to my next question, which really is about that whole character development process. Building a character, I mean, you're starting already with an incredible, baseline and knowing what some of the antics that he did in Nanaimo were. But taking these ideas that you see in a photograph or in some kind of writing through hearsay, through talking to a community or someone who participated or what have you, you really only get to grasp such a small, real, small bit of insight to what a character really is. So what was the process like for you going inside of this, larger than life, obviously, character, right?
Yes.
And then trying to hone in and make that character come alive again on the stage.
Yeah. So again, wonderful open-ended question, and those are just, thank you so much for offering that. Some people, some writers have a very complicated, very intricate through line to everything that's going to be happening in every scene, in every chapter, and an arc to the characters. For me, I create a character, and then I drop them into a scenario, and then I just listen to them, and they constantly surprise me. I would put, let's use Brother 12 as a perfect example. So I had Brother 12, put him in a scene with Madame Z, I had a sense of the restlessness that Madame Z was feeling at that time, sort of tired of Brother 12's charlatan behavior, a little tired of he was sort of known as a bit of a womanizer. So I put her as her own boss, a very strong, both the female leads are the 2 strongest characters in the play. There are two very, very strong women who have been battling. You can imagine how hard it was. It's still hard to be in these typically patriarchal environments. Certainly if you take the newspaper business, my lead in the newspaper battled to try to just survive in a man's world in the late 20s. So I would just take these characters, put them in a scene, and then just have them start talking. And that's how the characters and that's how the scenes grew.
And so for each, I mean, I'm really glad that you brought up the 2 women characters to start with, being that, and respectfully, March 8th, which is sometime past this interview, it's noted as International Women's Day. And I'm constantly surprised by the resilience of women as a whole, and coming from, no matter where you are in the world, there still is, in many cases, a patriarchal society. And so to have that strength, to see a character, because years ago, if you'd written this perhaps in 1920, 1930, rather than in, the 80s or 90s, when perhaps you started to write this character, you might have had a different vision of what this woman would have looked like.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
That's very true.
Because
it's true. I think that the strength, I can't say, I mean, I'm sort of looking over the characters. I'm just sort of right now just looking over the characters in the majority of my plays.
Yes.
I would have to say that the majority of the strongest characters are the females. that may be just out of my own personal bias, that I wish that I believe that if we had a far less the patriarchal component, not only just the white male, but overall overarching male dominated through the the 17th, 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries. Had that not been the case, we would be in a far better state as societies in general. And the evolution towards a greater egalitarian society, although there's so much still left to go, this is why I would like to see, and I'd like to showcase the strengths that the female characters bring, and the battles domestically, in their business, in world in general, that they still have to battle on a daily basis. So I think that's one of the things that I wanted to show is their strength.
Well, and again, I'm so delighted to hear you say that. I know that there are a lot of people that are applauding you in this moment. I can already hear the hail of applause in my own imagination, because I think that it's true. I think the world will be a little bit different. I also am a big believer that with time and with every generation comes a new breed of independent humans, whether or not they are female or male. And I think the good news is that we're finally coming to a place in society where acceptance is becoming more the norm and more the rule. Of course, I'm coming from a North American philosophy. It's a lot different in different parts of the world, for sure, where women's rights are still, crushed beyond a whole different discussion than what this program is about today. But I'm delighted to hear that we have strong characters, because it takes people to write strong women characters. Even in Hollywood, they talk about how few strong women roles that there are. It's changing, but there's still a lot of difficulty in those roles. But Sally Field and Jane Fonda and Rita Moreno and some of these incredibly wonderful, iconic women in their 80s now that we're seeing on the movie screen. They were the tough, strong ones back 80 years ago, right?
They were.
So that they were coming up and fighting their way through to pave the way for all of us when it comes to theater, music, and images on the screen. I'm going to take a quick break, if you don't mind, here just for 1 second, Bill. What a lovely conversation this has been so far.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much. And to our listeners who've just turned into Act 3 on CHLY 101.7, we're glad you're here. My name is Kathy Holmes. I'm proud to be your host of Act 3. And not only are we here on this wonderful platform of CHLY 101.7 FM, we're also on YouTube. So you can find us at act3mediaproductions.com. And there's a little button there. You can find some of the videos and you can scratch on it and push subscribe and share. That's what we'd like to do. You can also watch us on Shaw Spotlight on Shaw Cable 4. Our next episode of Act 3 is being filmed as we speak and will be up and running probably by the time you get to hear this message. At the end of the day, we're always delighted that you show up for our community. And I do want to remind you that the only reason that Act 3 exists today is because of your generosity. When you contribute to CHLY 101.7 FM, you help make programs like this stay afloat. So I encourage you this year, when you're doing your taxes and you're thinking about your giving and all the things we have to do for each other, $5 towards CHLY 101.7 every month would do us a whole lot of good. So think about bringing us into your financial planning for this upcoming year. Once again, in the Zoom booth with me, I have a very interesting gentleman who is discussing with us a play he's written and produced. Well, I actually, he told me that somebody else produced it, but we'll get more into that in a sec. Brother 12 is the name of the musical. It's not even a play. It is a play. It's a musical. And we're going to talk more about it right now. So thanks again for tuning in. Bill, welcome back to the program. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
When I think about this play, I'm curious about a number of things. One of the things that I'm really interested in knowing is whatever happened. I know he got on a boat and he sailed away and all of that other stuff, but the cult itself, did it transform into something else? What happened to the cult, and really, you know, how big did it eventually get? Was it in Cedar, or where? Give us a bit more information if you can about that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so as I said, through having some very wealthy donors that came and offered money, and as I say, at one time, I guess the height of the cult itself, of the Aquarium Foundation with Brother 12, the height of that was at the in around 1929, and they had the Aquarium Foundation itself, which had a board of directors, and it was actually some of the board of directors ended up becoming very disillusioned with what was happening, and with the abuse and things, some of the things that were happening in the colony itself. And it was a colony.
Sure.
I believe they purchased, Brother 12 and the Aquarium Foundation purchased a tract of land on Doris Island, and they moved over there, and it is both in Cedar and on Doris Island that the majority of the acolytes resided, where they would just come. And I don't know, to be honest, I'm not exactly sure how his fame spread so far, but certainly there were people from the southern United States and from the eastern seaboard. They just got wind of this amazing Brother 12 character, and all of the things that they had to say about a different way of living, sort of remove yourself from the shackles of capitalism. And I don't know if it was, to me, it seemed like a certain type of utopian society where, it's the trappings of the early 20th century life. And of course, at that time, there was, the Great Crash and the Depression, and there have been world wars, and there was just a lot of disillusionment with modern society. I think there was an awful lot of occultism. There are a lot of other cults all over the world, and I guess even like similar to now, I think it's pretty easy for people that are disillusioned with our society to take up with whatever it is that I think it's easy to get radicalized.
Absolutely.
Not just radicalized with whether it be Islamic or far right Christian, or whatever it is, or just New Age, or the people that now think that they should just get lots of arms and be anti-establishment. Whatever it is, there's quite a similarity between the time that Brother 12 was able to garner so many acolytes and so many people over to his cult and his colony, as there are now people just looking for something to believe in.
Yeah, that's so true. And I recognize that there was a period of time when occultism was rather popular.
Yes.
Still, even into the 70s and into the 80s, you were seeing, large groupings of people coming together. And, as much as you don't hear about it as much anymore, I know that it absolutely still exists.
Yes.
In the actual form of the occult sort of mindset, groups of people coming together, making a person, the focal point of some leadership, where in the absence of leadership, they're looking for something to follow and to believe in. And so, when I think about Brother 12, I'm interested, and I know that this sounds like a stupid question. I don't believe that there are ever such a thing as stupid question, but this does sound a little bit odd. Was there a Brother 11? Was there a Brother 13? What was the significance of Brother 12? And was it because in the beginning he had 12 disciples, or, what? Is there any conversation that could be highlighting that idea?
He did take on, there are some of the things that he expressed that were all from hearing, he was channeling, and there certainly was well-documented material from these masters of wisdom. And it was from these masters of wisdom that at one point he had visions while he was traveling in the south of France, and he was struck by these visions, and it was from these visions that he was guided to the west coast of Vancouver, or the east coast of Vancouver Island. He was guided there from Europe, really, and he had thought himself, he was called upon to be the leader, and it was through some of these teachings and through some of the visions that he felt that Brother 12, that was to be his how he was to be called. And that's when he relinquished his name as Edward Wilson. He just said, no, from now on, he had been transformed. And this transformation, and the voices said, you're to be the leader, and this is to be your name. And it was taken out of some of their teachings.
Interesting. What were some of his, I mean, in writing of the play or writing of the musical, what were some of the teachings that you incorporated in his philosophy as part of the wisdom of your play itself?
Yeah, so what I didn't do was delve too deeply into the literal history and his teachings. I wanted to, because the musical itself is it's a comedy. It's a dark comedy. It maybe highlights his Jekyll and Hyde nature, his showmanship, and his lust for money and for gold and for jewels, and that dichotomous existence that, as I said, so I focus more on the essence of him rather than the devilish details when I was creating him and how he was interacting with these other fictitious characters. So I took a lot of what they say poetic license.
Yes.
With that. So yes, there are historical books that are talking about certainly there are Masters of Wisdom that was certainly taken from a group of teachings that I believe he was first exposed to while he was still in England. And then it was whether these visions that he experienced, whether I didn't really want to offer my own sense of, was it schizophrenia? Was it really just voices speaking to him? Did he have periods of lucid connection with them? Was he just a charlatan? I wanted the audience to feel not only entertained by all the other characters and the lovely music and storytelling and fun, but just to think, well, there's things about him I really like. I can see how people were drawn into him.
Yeah, for sure.
He in his songs, in his teachings to the acolytes, you go, yeah, I can see he's kind of a likable character. And then, well, that's not so likable.
Yeah.
I really like the characters to have that ambiguity that I think all of us have.
Yeah.
I'm not that interested or drawn to saintly characters or one-sided evil characters. Neither of those groups really intrigue me as far as wanting to get in and create characters based on them. I want there to be, I want them to be empathetic. You can have some compassion for them, you can have some empathy for them, and you can enjoy them. But I do want there to be this darker, I want our masks of the characters to drop, and I want this darker side to be revealed.
Yeah. Because
I think we all have them.
Absolutely. And there's something to be said about breaking down a character so that you can actually see them for who they really are and identify with some of the characteristics that each of those characters may have.
Exactly. Yes.
You
Good point.
know, right? Like it's that there's something I think we always resonate with stuff, you know, when we see a character that we really like, there's reasons why we really like them. When we
Yes.
see a character we don't like so much, sometimes it's an unveiling of something we see in ourselves. We might not like
Exactly
so
right.
much, right? Right?
Yeah, exactly right. And I think that's why if in the play itself, so every scene has some, you know, it's fast-paced dialogue. It has, you know, there's a lot of very hilarious moments. I think that it's the songs themselves are very tuneful. And if on the surface of what's happening in the play is sort of twists and turns about mystery and unraveling of plots and lots of very, very hilarious moments.
Yeah.
The song, the lyrics themselves offer an insight into each one of the characters, what I would call the pathos, if that makes sense, the underlying pathos of the characters. Every character, all 6 of the characters have a song that I've just described as their origin song. And it just talks about them, and they drop the veil and they talk a little bit about themselves in a tuneful way, but the light, the shrouding of that, the masks that we wear, that's in the scenes themselves. But when they get into the song, I think that's when they're being the most truthful.
Yeah, I mean, really, that sounds inspiring to me from the perspective of, you know, while the character is in the middle of the task, what they're doing, whatever that might be, right?
Yes.
And then you pull them almost a spotlight out away from that action of what they do to their internal struggle or their internal perception of how life looks for them, gives you, I think, a much deeper glimpse into the overall storyline, because then you start to see how these 6 people are mapping their lives together, and the events that follow make so much more sense when you see, you know, how these I want to call them conflicts, but conflict is the wrong word, right? These challenges, these experiences, and the difficulty in making decisions, right? Do I stay with this guy? Do I,
right?
You know what I mean? Like, is this brother 12 really all that in 2 bags of chips? I'm thinking of Madam, was it Madam Z?
Yes.
Madam Z and her way of viewing all of these 5 other people.
Yes.
You know, and does she relate to these other characters in the same way, or is it mostly a relationship and a push-pull between her and the main character?
Yeah, the 2, I mean, all, like you say, all of the characters have a chance to have their masks slip a bit and reveal some vulnerability because of their humanness, you know, whether it be chronic alcoholism or just what Churchill called taking the black dog for a walk, is, you know, suffering from bouts of depression, or, you know, whatever it is that is what they consider the flaw. That mask comes down, that's revealed. I think Madam Z's 2 most important relationships are between Brother 12 and the other leading female role, Doris Abercrombie, who she ends up, without giving too much away, they are both very strong, determined characters, and they end up being drawn together begrudgingly because of the strength they have to show as women in a man's world. And I think they share that. They share one of their fatal flaws is just loving bad men. You know, they have a history of you know, loving men that are weak or are just men, you know, they have flaws, and they, you know, they're not all, they pretend to be you know, knights in shining armor, and they're not that, you know, we're not even capable of that. God knows I probably pretended I was a knight in shining armor. I've
No, I think
never
every woman
been.
and every man pretended that we were Cinderella and Prince Charming. Like there's something
Yes.
to be said about that fantasy that we are brought up with as young people. But it
Yeah.
is true, the disillusionment that comes when you have a character that can express that, when so many people, that's the beauty of theater, right? Is being able to be in the character's mindset. How were they feeling? How are they coping? And what's the takeaway, right? For us as individuals that would go,
Yes.
oh yeah. And you said something really brilliant. I forgot about this quote that you quoted from Shakespeare. It's about taking the black dog for the walk.
Yes.
You know, and I'm curious about that because I'm wondering when I think about the characters that you wrote,
Mhm.
I mean, you know, some people might assume that it's Brother 12 himself, but I've also heard you talk fondly of the other two characters. So, two of the six. Did you have a muse for your characters beyond the, because you said that, you know, obviously it's Brother 12 is a character for which there's enough documentation that you could put something together that makes the framework of a character, adding
Yeah.
your own, you know, license to it, of course. But then there's these other five people that you're basing story to. Was there someone in your life that in any of these characters that sort of was a bit of the frame for these people?
Well, I think that the strong female characters, probably the genesis of those were the wonderfully strong females that I've had the great joy and privilege of having in my life through my life, whether it be, you know, my mother who, you know, lost my father. We're still in our early 20s, and my mother became the matriarch of the family. It's just a wonderful gift to have such a strong female role model. My two sisters are very strong. I've been blessed with having just wonderful, strong, funny, bright, forgiving, powerful, compassionate women. Not that I haven't had wonderful men as well. I don't mean that there
Of
aren't any
course. No,
strong men,
not,
but I
not in
mean,
any way.
you know, but I mean that I really, their presence was a gift in my life and always has been.
Of course.
So I think it was easy to create strong, funny, self-effacing women that knew their own flaws and were strong and rose above them. So it was easy. It's very easy to create strong women that see their own flaws and are still able to reach out and be healing aspects, healing elements in other people's lives. And one of the other main characters who I haven't mentioned is his name is Raymond. He plays a very pivotal part in the play. He's another investigative journalist, and he is a struggling alcoholic. So he's a jazz musician. He's an investigative journalist in the 20s, and he has struggled through his adult life with alcoholism and depression. So he'll get on a role where he's successful and he's playing jazz and he's writing great stories and he's got front page coverage and the world looks great, and then it doesn't. And then he struggles with, he'll go on a binge for a week. And certainly I see myself, had I taken a different path and not become sober years and years ago, 40 years now, I probably could easily have been Ray.
Yeah.
So it's maybe a cautionary tale for me, and maybe a cautionary tale just in general for people who we just keep struggling. I mean, there's always something we struggle with.
Well, and thank you for sharing your vulnerability there as well. I think that, and your honesty and your own background, right? There's something to be said for that. When I think about characters and I think about art as a whole, the artistic expression generally comes from a place of deep teaching. right, comes generally from a place where somewhere along the line, a pivotal moment happened in one's life that it made them to make a different decision, to go down a different path, and even sometimes the one less traveled. And so, you know, I think that that's important when we think about character development. A dear friend of mine was on the show a few months back, and she was talking about how she was coming up with her characters. And very similar to you, she said, you know, there were very strong people in her life that created some of the characters. But ultimately, at the end of the day, she found that some of the people that she was writing about were either her in disguise, in other words, the dream that she wished she were, or they were coming from a teachable moment that she'd had where she had to make a deep decision. And so, of course, you can build up all the rest of it around it, but the root is always, you know, a place of knowledge. Sometimes, I think
it is.
I could be wrong, but I think it is. Yeah.
No, I think it's true, and I think the majority of my plays, and certainly this musical is a paradigm example of that. The characters are, you know, quick-witted, and they're able to offer ironic twists on things, so that when the audience is engaged in the storytelling and watching the story unfold with the characters, think you're, you know, very entertained. You find yourself laughing out loud at something like, oh wait, that's a little dark, but you know that, so that the trajectory of each scene has a lot of humor, and because I think telling the truth in humor is the best way to do it.
Yes, couldn't agree with you more. It's very important to be able to laugh at ourselves, and especially if we've been through something, like if we see ourselves reflected in something, that's the beauty of humanity, is to be able to have a giggle, to be vulnerable, to share ourselves, and then to laugh out loud about it, because this is the experience, right? This is what we're supposed to be doing, is we're humans in a spiritual experience, or spirits in a human experience, or well, I'm not even sure how the quote goes, but at the end of the day, that's for me, one of the best ways to learn. I hate to cut us short, but I'm looking at the time and I'm going, oh my gosh, our hour is nearly up. Like, I mean, we've just got a few minutes left. And so, Bill, I think there's two things that we need to do. Number one, I think it's important we tell people, how do they get their tickets?
Yes, well, we invite everyone to come. We think it's a little jewel. I would put our songs, characters, and lyrics up against anything, and we can hardly wait to put this in front of another Nanaimo audience. The tickets are available through the Port Theatre website. So if you just go to the Port Theatre and you click on their tickets, the events page is there. You can go through online, you can phone them, or you can go to the Port Theatre in person, and all of our tickets are there. And I say it's at the Malaspina, which is a wonderful little theater, the VIU Malaspina Theater, wonderful little theater. So that's where you can get the tickets.
Well, I think I'll be getting my tickets right away. Go to the Port Theatre, you guys. You know you need to get the tickets for this, and then head on up to Malaspina and watch the play. It is coming on to the stage as of, I believe you said March the 30th to April 4th.
March 30th to April 2nd.
Till April 2nd. Sorry, March 30th till April 2nd. What time does the show start?
7:30.
7:30. So you know what to do. You've got a call to action here. The last thing that I have, and again, I only have 1 minute, less than a minute left. If you could give our audience a little bit of a takeaway, what would be the word of the nugget of wisdom you'd like to share with our community?
Nugget of wisdom, boy. I would say to be willing to forgive yourself and forgive others, and look for extra ways to connect compassionately with the rest of your community.
Absolutely. I think those are a perfect way to end our conversation today. Thank you so much, Bill Miner, for being on the program today. It was truly a pleasure.
Really, just a pleasure to spend an hour talking with you, and thank you for such wise and open questions. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, my pleasure. And with that, we'll say goodbye to our audience. Have yourself a fantastic day. We'll see you next time on Act 3.